All right.
All right, everyone. We're going to continue. That was an exciting topic that Nicholas just gave us. Hello. Quiet in the house. All right, we're going to continue. That was a very exciting topic that Nick just gave us. We truly needed more than 25 minutes. I was truly intrigued. He put up probably every technology, buzzword, software, and he actually showed that DevSecOps is real and is being implemented. And he also gave a great segue to Jen Lin. He mentioned Sidecar and Istios and Service Mesh over and over again. And if you didn't notice, when his last slide, his reference said, had an IBM link there to go get more information. Jen is from IBM Red Hat. Jen is, I love her title. She's a master innovator. Jen has over, let me see, I make to get this right, 100 patents out there already. So she truly is a master innovator. Jen is going to actually today talk to us about what we just saw on Nick's slides about what is Istio. She's going to demystify what a service mesh is and what Istio. So Jen, we thank you. Jen is no stranger to this audience and this crowd. She always gets a top 5 review at KubeCon. All these other things, and I'm actually interested. I saw that you do Container Camp.
Yes, I do.
What's Container Camp?
It's a global conference. They normally host it in UK, Australia, and sometimes in the United States. It's all about containers.
I thought I've heard it all, but let's all sign up for Container Camp. But Jen, continue. Thank you, Jen. Let's give her a hand. Let's give Lynn a hand. I call it Lynn.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? Okay, good. How many of you have used Istio? A couple of hands. How many of you actually look at our documentation site, istio.io? Okay, awesome. Thank you. So as my previous speaker, really good job, Nick said, the industry is actually going through this trend, going to cloud native. We are looking at, you're probably looking at too, break your monolithic application gradually into microservices. How many of you are actually looking at that? Okay, wow, that's a lot of you. More of you than knowing Istio, visited istio.io. So as part of this journey, you're going to see a lot of challenges because you're going to have services. There are going to be many services. They're going to need to communicate to each other. And most likely, you're going to be dealing with dynamic environments. So it's not just going to be Kubernetes. It's not just going to be VMs. And you are going to need to compose your services and connect them through the network. So let's talk about some of these challenges. So how do you actually roll out a new version of your microservices without downtime? And how do you do A/B and canary testing? Because you really want to go through that testing to make sure you want to switch to a newer version of your microservices. How do you launch a given version of your services in the dark and not impacting anybody else so that you can keep the testing yourself first? And how do you actually gain visibilities into your services so that you know exactly what's going on? And finally, your service might only handle certain rates, and how do you actually limit the rates of your services? And one other challenge I think is also critical is also as you break that big monolithic to many microservices, your security team is going to knock on your door. How are you actually secure the communication of your services so that you can be compliant within your company? You might be thinking Kubernetes comes to the rescue. Kubernetes has gained a lot of momentum, and in fact, it's the first project that graduated from CNCF. It's the de facto container orchestration system. It's also the new application server. So it's really the shiny new thing. And it's getting to a phase that's becoming boring now. Kubernetes also supports version rollout and canary deployment. And if you go to kubernetes.io, this is what Kubernetes says about version rollout. So basically, you can set the image for a given deployment to use a newer version of your image. In this case, we're using Nginx. And then you can do editing of your deployment, and then you can roll out the deployment to the new version, and Kubernetes knows how to roll out one by one. So they already have basic support for that. Kubernetes also supports canary deployment. It's really limited. Well, you can do canary by the number of replicas. So in this case, if you want to do 25%, it's easy because you do a 3 and 1 for the canary. However, what if you want to do 99% goes to a stable and only 1% goes to the canary? Then you have to have 99 replicas for your stable. So there's a lot of challenges with Kubernetes. Even though it's a shiny thing, it's becoming stable enough for enterprise to use it. As you've gone through the cloud native journey with microservices, you're going to question yourself, how do you start launching the services? How do you control that traffic shifting precisely so you're not relying on the number of replicas to control the traffic? And the network among the microservices are not always reliable. And how do you handle the unpredictable failures and be able to retry? Do you really want to build that retry in your services itself and have your application developer handle the network failures themselves? And as Nick said, there's like so many languages in DoD. So do you want each application developer team handle that in their specific language way? And they probably could handle it, but they're not going to do it consistently. How do you actually gain visibility and monitor and tracing your services? And how do you ensure communication secure and enforce policies to your services? So those are a set of challenges with Kubernetes. And also, what if I'm not even running on Kubernetes, right? What if I'm using VM or bare metals? Some of you might have seen this chart. How many of you have seen a chart like this that explains what service mesh is? A service mesh provides transparent and language networking for connecting, observing, secure, and control microservices. Many of you probably seen this chart. What Istio is, also focus on the core 4 problems. And you've probably seen this of our Istio.io. Don't take screenshots for this. All these are available on Istio.io. And this is the reason I challenge you not taking screenshots. Is because I don't like these explanations. Because these explanations, well, it's nice and official on Istio.io, but it doesn't focus on you as the developer, as the operators. So let's take a pause on what exactly is service mesh. I want you to think about that. Envision your application is a little bit messy, like this room, because your operator, your platform team asks you to handle a lot of things, a lot of challenges that we just described. And then one day, there is the storage attachment that's also given to you to allow you to kind of unclutter your room, that you don't have to handle the long essential thing as part of your services to you. So with that storage box, you can actually unclutter your room so you can put the long essential stuff into that storage box. So your room, your application is going to be clean, and it's going to focus on the essential stuff you need. So to me, the service mesh really is, service mesh provides a language-neutral extraction from your services so that your services doesn't have to handle a lot of challenges I was describing, you don't have to handle it in your language specific way. And we, as the service mesh provider, provides you this dummy initialization as a storage box, which is what Nick called a sidecar in the early talk. And you can also allow, we also provide you API to program that attachment so that you can be intelligent with that attachment. And along the journey, you also get visibilities into each of your services. And what Istio is, if you explain Istio based on user perspective, in addition to its open service mesh platform, Istio really provides you the standard attachment through Envoy proxy to your application container. And then further, it provides you the ability to intelligently configure policies for that proxy sidecar without redeploying your application. This is big because you actually don't need to retouch and redeploy your microservices through configuration of the intelligence of simple YAML policies through Istio. You can actually configure your canary deployment. You can configure doc launching. You can configure your security policies. So all that can be done without redeploying your applications. Finally, Istio really enables clear separation between your application developers and the attachment. Who is going to manage the attachment is typically your operators. Apply policies on the attachment. How many of you have seen this diagram? Okay, a couple of you. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain this diagram. So this is a no surprise from Istio.io. It essentially describes the architecture of Istio, where we divide into control plane and data plane. So on the bottom is our control plane. As part of the mesh, there's a couple of key components: Mixer, which handles telemetry and policies, and then Pilot, which pushes configuration to that Envoy proxy, and Gaily is our configuration and ingestion system. Citadel, which handles security to make sure you have the TLS certificate mounted to the sidecar, distribute that certificate. And then as user visits their microservices, the request always goes to the Envoy sidecar, which capture the traffic through IP tables. And then as the service A needs to call the other services, the outbound traffic also always goes to the Envoy sidecar locally on that same pod, which is a Kubernetes concept, and then goes to the other service. It doesn't go to the other service directly because Envoy is going to capture that traffic and then use that to do its intelligence thing and then forward the traffic to B if A is even allowed to talk to B. So there's a lot of intelligence can be built in because Envoy is capture all the inbound traffic and outbound traffic. However, I actually don't 100% agree with the diagram. So the first thing I don't agree is we actually made a lot of effort as a community to separate policy and telemetry. So it's really two deployments and two services. And the reason we want to separate that is because policy check is as part of the user request flow. So you're going to have that latency as you call service A to service B to do that policy check. Telemetry is not. And the other thing I think it's really missing on this diagram is about user interaction. I forgot you as a user, how are you going to interact with Istio control plane? It's actually interact through kubectl or istioctl. So as a user, you can supply your YAML file as policies and then apply them through your favorite commands. And it's going to send to Kubernetes API server where Gaily would be listening into the configurations and then having the configuration pushed to pilot and mix policy and telemetry. Also, we have this new feature being existed for a while now that allows you to have automatic sidecar injection so that we can actually automatically inject the Envoy proxy for you for your deployments. So that's facilitated by this sidecar injector component in the control plane. Finally, we actually eat our own dog food. So in pilot, policy and telemetry, we run sidecar ourselves. And the reason is we want to secure the traffic of our own control plane. And we want to gain visibilities of our mesh control plane. Also, finally, there is the boundary of the mesh. I'm sure you're going to think about how you're going to expose your services, if it's edge services, to the outside of the world, and how you actually control the traffic going from your services to outside of the cluster or outside of the mesh. So that's the job of the ingress gateway and egress gateway, which you can apply policies to precisely control what's exposed and what can be consumed from outside of the mesh. So deploy pods and services to the mesh, it's actually really easy, and this is something we as a community work really hard to make it easy for you, that you can use kube inject, or you can label a namespace to be auto injection enabled. However, it's not as easy as it appears to be, so I want to highlight this. If you actually try Istio, you want to make sure you actually read the pods and services requirements, that we do ask you to name a service port for each of the services, and also declare a container port. Your pod must have a services associated today. So if you are doing a jobs of Kubernetes, it's not going to work today. And we also want you to label your deployments as highlighted on the screen. This is important for us to know these metrics are associated with a given deployment, a given label and version for a given app. And we don't want you to use UID 167. The reason is the Envoy proxy are using that. And finally, you want to ask yourself, do you have a net admin privilege when you deploy your microservices? If not, you should look at the CNI support within Istio CNI. Now, let's assuming you have moved one or more of your services into the mesh. So what exactly have you gained? So at this case, you have a dummy sidecar because you don't have any policies. You are not using Istio to program your sidecar yet. Immediately, just injecting the sidecar, you're going to gain visibilities into each of your services. In fact, with Istio, we've never seen so many 503. And then one of our customers finally said, the reason we are seeing so many 503 not be able to talk to the other services is because Istio actually exposed their metrics to us. So we actually get to see all these error codes. And I actually went through a journey of Envoy configuration and everything because of the length of the talk. I couldn't go deeper. But in fact, as part of that journey, I find out even with dummy sidecar, in addition to telemetry, you actually also gain retries. We actually do default retries for you, and we also do timeout configuration for you by default. So that's actually huge just by attaching the sidecar in your services. Now let's talk about some basic intelligence. I'm going to really talk about this example. How many of you know the booking flow example? Okay, so it's a really simple example that we use in Istio.io. And the two services I'm going to talk about is product page to review. And review has 3 versions. So by default, if you're not applying any Istio policies, it's going to do round robin. Remember we talked about Kubernetes based on the number of replicas? If you have one for each of the review services, it's just going to be round robin among the three, which is boring. What if you want everything goes to version 1? With Istio, you can define virtual services and destination rule to configure how your traffic exactly want to be shipped. And you don't have to redeploy any of your review services. You don't have to redeploy your product page services. All you need to do is actually specify what is your route, what is your destination, and what are the versions you are route to. And boom, that would only hit the review version 1. And what if you want to dock launch the review version 2 to a specific user, JSON? So in this case, you would specify a header and specify when the end user exactly match JSON, it goes to review 2, and for everything else, it goes to review version 1. So notice here, it's just a couple of YAML. It's actually one single YAML, and you don't have to redeploy anything else. However, how many lines are my Envoy configuration in this simple case? It's actually a couple of thousand lines. Programming Envoy is actually not simple. This is a diagram just to show you, give you a picture of exactly what's going on within that magic. Envoy has inbound handler. Envoy also have outbound handler. So the traffic really goes through inbound handler to listener to virtual listener, and then to identify which cluster it goes to, and then it goes to the product page, the actual container listened on port 9080, which I think it runs on WebSphere Liberty. And then as the traffic, when product page calls the review services, it goes through the outbound handler and goes to the listener routes and cluster. And finally important is the endpoint. In this case, this endpoint is round robin, so it goes to each of the reviews. But if you actually apply policies, the endpoint and the routes would actually resolve into a given version or multiple versions, depends on your route rule. So it will be a little bit more interesting. So program Envoy is really, really hard. So why Istio? Istio actually really, what Istio essentially does is really help you program the Envoy through that simple YAML I showed you, so you don't have to craft that thousands of lines yourself. So if you go to CNCF landscape pages, there's actually multiple service mesh projects. So why Istio? This is the stats of Istio, of company contribution. It's one of my favorites because it's a really diverse community. When you pick an open source project, you want to look at the ecosystem. You want to look at the company that's backing up the project. So Istio is a really healthy project, and Istio is using Envoy sidecar, which is another very healthy project. So you can see it's not dominated by one single company. So how do I get started? Istio.io is a single source of truth for everything Istio. One thing I want to highlight here on Istio.io is we do have a Get Started button. We want to click on that. We also have support on Stack Overflow. We have Slack open for everybody, so we welcome you guys to ask questions. Finally, I have to give this 30-second thing because without it, I won't be able to travel to here. So IBM is running a Core for Code challenges for 2019. And last year, we did this global developer challenging for natural disasters, for technology solution for natural disasters. And the winner this year is going to get 200,000 cash prize. And to find more information, you can go there to find out more. Thank you so much.
So first of all, let me clarify, because I'll give you a new name and a whole new title. Lynn Sun, and her real title is a senior technical staff member, and she's a master inventor. It's a real title and real name. We thank you for that. I got something new out of the presentation. I hope you all did. Do we have time for one question?
Sure. Yeah, we can do a
We
quick
got time
question.
for one question.
And then also a note to folks, we're going to make the slides available online. You'll get a nurture email, so you don't have to, it's kind of like a concert. You don't want to watch this through your screen. We got the real thing right here. So a question, were there any questions?
For Lynn?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it?
Does the retry have a default value?
Yes, I think it's 2. Yeah.
So the question was, is there a default value for
For
retries?
And you can also configure it through the YAML file I showed you, and then apply it through kubectl or Istio CTL.
Right on. Cool.
So we're on
Thanks,
break?
everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much for being here.